Peppa and George decided to play in the forest with their toys. While they were playing, they didn't notice how far they had wandered into the woods. As the game went on, Peppa and George lost track of time, and dusk began to fall. Suddenly, Peppa noticed some movement nearby, but when she turned her head, no one was there. Peppa took George by the hand, and they started looking for a way out of the forest. George heard rustling behind them and told Peppa. She told him to stay where he was and went to check what it was. The bushes kept rustling. Peppa slowly approached and pushed them aside. To her relief, it was just a rabbit that quickly hopped away. Peppa turned to go back, but then she heard George scream. She ran toward the sound and saw a deer holding George and running off into its den. Peppa was terrified, but she was determined to save her brother. The deer was too fast and Peppa couldn't catch up. She began to cry, but then she noticed the deer's footprints leading deeper into the forest. She still had a chance to save George. As she followed the tracks, it began to rain. Peppa realized that if she didn't hurry, the rain would wash the tracks away and she'd lose her only lead. She started running. After about 5 minutes, Peppa reached a cave. She didn't even know there was a cave in this forest. Gathering her courage, she stepped inside. It was dark and she had to feel her way along the walls. Soon she saw a faint light ahead and slowly moved toward it. As she came closer, Peppa saw George trapped in a cage. When she turned her head, she noticed Susie and Pedro locked in cages on the other side. She had to save them all. Suddenly, she heard footsteps coming toward her. Peppa quickly hid inside an open cage, hoping the deer would pass by. But then the door slammed shut, and the deer began to laugh. Peppa realized it had all been a trap. She didn't know what to do and started to cry. The deer left, probably to hunt for more victims. Suddenly, Peppa heard more footsteps approaching. In fear, she squeezed her eyes shut. Then she heard a familiar voice. It was Daddy Pig. He had gone to look for Peppa and George after finding their toys near the cave. Daddy Pig opened the cages and told them to follow him. When they reached the exit, Daddy Pig realized something was wrong. The cave entrance was sealed with large stones. He tried to move them, but they were too heavy. Peppa then heard laughter from the other side of the rocks, followed by slow, retreating footsteps.
More is needed. A full collection is required.
The fair buzzed with lights and voices. Colorful stalls beckoned with sweets. Peppa pulled Grandpa by the hand toward the brightest stand. The shelves were bursting with Labubu figurines. They all smiled with identical mouths. One golden figurine stood apart. Its crimson eyes followed Peppa's every move, then slowly winked at her. Behind the stall, an emaciated seller looked as pale as paper, their smile frozen too wide with too many teeth. Peppa begged Grandpa to win her a golden figurine. He nodded and moved smoothly. He threw a ball into an arcade machine. The ball hit its target. The figurine dropped into a tray. Grandpa picked it up. His eyes glazed over, and he reached into his pocket, pulling out not just one, but dozens of identical golden labubus that spilled onto the carpet. He whispered endless repetitions.
More is needed. A full collection is required.
Outside, people with prizes froze in place, their faces fixed with empty smiles. Peppa ran into darkness. The alley behind the fair was silent and dark. A flickering street lamp illuminated an ominous figure, that same seller. But now his body consisted of hundreds of fused figurines. They moved and creaked teeth, Clicking nearby stood Grandpa, whose skin had turned gray and hard, the smile frozen forever. He stared blankly through glassy eyes at emptiness. The seller extended his hand, holding one figurine, a face resembling Peppa's with glowing crimson eyes, a mouth stretched into an unnatural grin. Peppa felt icy coldness at her fingertips. The skin on her palm became smooth and glossy. Hundreds of crimson-eyed monsters stared at her. The silence shattered with a sharp click. Peppa wakes up in her room. Outside the window, dawn is breaking. Everything is calm. She plays with George while Mom and Dad are busy with their chores. A strange feeling outside the window. Peppa approaches the window. The sky is gray, foggy. The air is cold. She feels a sense of unease, as if something is watching her. Distortion of reality. She washes her face and looks in the mirror. Her face changes, her eyes darken, and her smile becomes sinister. A cold blue light appears in the room, creating a distortion effect. Suddenly, the mirror cracks and shatters. Shards fall to the floor, and a shadow appears in the reflection, quickly disappearing. The room disappears, an entrance to another reality. Suddenly, objects dissolve or vanish. Peppa finds herself in a gray room with no windows or doors. The walls are covered with mysterious symbols and fingerprints. A faint rustling sound can be heard in the air. Whispers of the past, soft voices. Remember, you're not alone here. All memories are part of you. They grow louder, as if someone is whispering right into her ear. Peppa feels a chill down her spine. Shadows appear. George with empty eyes, Mommy Pig with tears on her face, Daddy Pig breathing heavily, his face distorted by fear. They move or stand still, their shadows stretch across the walls, creating a creepy atmosphere. Peppa realizes the room has remembered all of the characters' fears. She searches for runes or symbols on the walls to understand what's happening. Suddenly, snake-like hands or claws start stretching out from the walls, trying to grab her. The characters begin to disappear or transform into terrifying creatures. George screams about a zombie dinosaur with empty black-red eyes. Mommy Pig cries, and her tears turn into drops of black liquid. Daddy Pig breathes heavily and looks very scared. His face is distorted by fear. At this moment, a sinister bunny appears with glowing eyes and an evil smile, watching everything with malice. Peppa decides to break the runes on the walls with a hammer. When she hits them, the walls crack and vibrate. At that moment, a huge monster emerges from the darkness, a creature with long claws, sharp teeth, and burning eyes. It growls and tries to grab her. After destroying the symbols, everything around plunges into darkness. The monster roars and disappears into an abyss. The room completely vanishes. Only emptiness or endless darkness remains. Peppa returns to her room. Everything seems normal again. But inside her remains a feeling of heaviness and fear. She sits by the window of her house with a pensive expression, gazing into the distance, as if she senses something sinister inside herself or nearby. Grandpa came back from fishing with no catch. He was dragging an old chest covered in shells. Black, salty slime oozed from its cracks. The chest whispered softly, melodically, like a seashell. Evie smiled and reached for it. Slime dripped onto the sand, forming uneven letters. They vanished as though washed away by an invisible tide. Grandpa sat at the edge. His fingers had turned blue, sharp black shells growing beneath his nails. He scraped them across the chest's lid. The water around the pier stilled. A fisherman rose from the water. His eyes were milky white. He grabbed Peppa's hand. His skin was rough, as if covered with nets. It calls its own home. Into the depths, he whispered. Behind him, the water swelled. Something in it was breathing. That night, Peppa heard a low hum, as if the sea were flowing right into the walls. Thin black tentacles stretched through the window. They slid across the glass, leaving marks. The chest stood below on the living room floor. Its whisper broke with glitches, as though the voice came from an old radio. By morning, the boat rocked by the pier. Grandpa knelt before the chest. It was open. Black water lashed from within. It did not spill over, but rose upward. Inside sat Evie. Slippery tentacles coiled around her legs. Her skin shimmered with scales. Her eyes were black with red sparks. Evie silently beckoned Peppa. The world lurched. Peppa found herself in a void with no bottom. Black tentacles held her wrist. Around her floated enormous silhouettes like sea creatures. The chest with Evie hung in the darkness, its lids breathing. The whisper had become a low rumble, which turned into a sharp metallic screech. Peppa, Zoe, and Candy stayed overnight at school. Flashlights stood on the desks. The children laughed, playing hide and seek. The lights began to flicker. Chalk writings distorted, letters twisted, crawling by themselves across the board. The laughter faded. Strange voices softly whispered their names. Red eyes flickered on the walls, watching every movement. Peppa felt an icy chill, her heart racing. Suddenly, a silhouette darted behind her. Red eyes stared straight at her. Peppa, Zoe, and Candy rushed into the hallway. The doors slammed shut on their own. The lamps flickered. Shadows from the ceiling and walls slid down, stretching into tentacles. They moved toward the children, intertwining and writhing. The children ran, the echo of their footsteps blending with a faint metallic hum. A silhouette flashed ahead, its eyes glowing red. For a moment, it seemed they had managed to escape it. The children hid behind the tables. The dishes trembled. The space itself seemed to breathe. For a brief moment, they calmed down, catching their breath, thinking the danger had passed. But from the corners, the shadows suddenly came alive, wrapping around Zoe and Candy, seeping into their limbs. Their eyes flared red. Their movements turned sharp and unnatural. Evening. Peppa Pig's family is in the living room. Peppa is playing with a new mirror. It is unusual, with a carved frame and slightly misty glass, but no one paid much attention to it. Peppa notices a strange figure in the reflection, a tall Labubu with glowing amber eyes and a mocking smile. She turns around. No one is there. She looks again. Labubu is back in the mirror, and now he is reaching out his hand through the glass. Daddy Pig comes over to see what is happening. He picks up the mirror, and Labubu's yellow eyes suddenly flare from within as black, oily liquid pours onto the floor from the glass. It spreads quickly, forming dark patterns and little shadows with bright eyes. The family panics and tries to escape, but the liquid comes alive and crawls toward them. It engulfs the whole house. Labubu steps out of the mirror. Mummy Pig tries to cover the mirror with a blanket, but Labubu breaks free, and the room fills with shadows and whispers. Huddles together, the lamplight dims, and the shadows creep up along the walls. Daddy Pig finds a flashlight and shines the beam into Labubu's eyes. For a moment, the monster shudders and pulls back, but his whisper echoes through the house. Labubu will not leave. The family looks around. Has the monster gone? They embrace one another. Peppa returns to the living room and gazes into the mirror. It is coated in dust, yet in the glass, a tiny amber spark flickers. In the dark room, a quiet, sinister laugh can be heard.